and to come and be with us today to talk about what we have seen in 2020 and the plans for 2021, particularly from the government's perspective in this new normal. Ladies and gentlemen, up first is Honorable S.B. Moyo, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Trade, to give us a policy presentation in his area of work. Honorable Moyo.
Thank you. Well, I'm sure this does not determine the height of people. Mrs. Ngobile Manzari, our boss here, and the chairman of the CEO Roundtable Africa, Mr. Ozas Bida, my colleague ministers who are here, the governor of the Reserve Bank is represented by Dr. Mbunga, distinguished fellow panelists, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. Indeed, when I was invited, I saw this invitation yesterday. I've seen it many times, but I was not sure who is CEO Roundtable. Is this another business organization? Who is CZI? Who is ZNCC? Who is Business Council of Zimbabwe? Who is Buy Zimbabwe? Who is this and that? Whom do we talk to as government? I'm also provoking you. Okay. But let me thank you, Chairman, for this invitation to join this very distinguished panel and for affording me the opportunity to contribute to your discussion this morning, particularly on a range of topical issues, all of them very relevant to how, together, we can and indeed must move our country forward towards our shared vision of an upper middle income economy by 2030. Well, as Minister of Foreign Affairs, one of my primary objectives, in line with the foreign policy pillars enunciated by the President of the Republic in November 2017, it was to end isolation of this country. It was to spearhead a policy of reaffirmation, engagement, and re-engagement. And above all, my ministry was to spearhead the concept and the mantra that Zimbabwe was now open for business, and that it was the best emerging market which the world could actually have on the market. And above all, we had to change policy, and the direction was we must adopt economic or transactional diplomacy. Now, within this context, it obviously brings business into it. But the point is the strengthening of existing relationships, the building of new ones, and the rebuilding of relationships, for whatever reason, have lapsed or even deteriorated over the past few 2 decades or so. And our approach to this is premised on the concept of a concentric cycles of priority and focus. Normally, we begin with consolidating relations, both economic, political, with the region, within our own SADC region. And I can tell you that our visit to all the other countries, which was one of the major aspects of consolidating relations, both political and economic within the region, realized that our trade balance had actually gone into the negative with a lot of countries, even neighboring countries. And that was not acceptable. It was embarrassing. Yes, people could say it was because of the macroeconomic stability back home. But I can tell you that I believe that the private sector have got a bigger role in ensuring that this whole process works well. Beyond that, we have concentrated on reinforcing relations with the continent by way of more active participation in all organs of the African Union and in key enablers of both regional and international integration, such as COMESA, the tripartite free trade area, and perhaps most importantly, the African Continental Trade Area Agreement, which was recently signed. All these provide an opportunity for Zimbabwean businesses to really penetrate and blossom. As you will be aware, the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement is due to become fully operational on the 1st of January, 2021. Are we ready as the private sector? Less than 1 month away, and our participation will obviously give us a lot of advantages and positioning within the framework of regional integration and intercontinental integration. It will give us preferential access to a market of 1.2 billion people, give us access to regional value chains. I will not talk about the money which is in Africa, but it will attract also inward investment. It will promote industrialization. It will boost domestic beneficiation and value addition capacity. And it will provide opportunity to use idle or underutilized industrial capacity via tool manufacturing and various other aspects. I was talking to a South African minister who said this Continental Free Trade Area Agreement is a God-given thing to South Africa. Why? Because we are going to be churning out a lot of products as the major industrialized country. And I say, but it is also a God-given agreement. He says, why? And I said, because we are the most skilled and most educated, and therefore we are going to be churning out a lot of services. Have we thought about that as the private sector? This weekend, an extraordinary African Union summit will convene, virtual of course, in order to enable African heads of state and government to take decisions on a range of outstanding issues relating to the Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. Further afield, we have worked hard to renew and deepen our ties with intergovernmental organizations such as the African, Caribbean, and Pacific Group of countries, the non-aligned group, and even the Group of 77, which includes China. Beyond that, there is the wider international community, the United Nations organizations, and its various specialized agencies, in all of which we seek to play an active and positive role, and where, in close coordination with others, we seek to counter the worrying trend by some to undermine the multilateral rules-based system, which has served by and large and to sustain global peace and stability over the past 70 years or so. And within the region, we have played an important part of regional stability. Stability is a key enabler to economic development so that you, the business sector, can freely undertake business. I believe that we've made steady progress in all these forms on reaffirmation, re-engagement, and engagement. Better or perhaps more visible progress with regard to the consolidation of long-standing friendships and the building of new partnerships than with the restoration of broken and or interrupted relationships. But even in this latter position or category, there has been a significant all-round improvement in both the substance and tenure of our engagement. Re-engagement with those who had separated themselves from us and who resorted to the importation of punitive measures against us was never going to be an easy or walk the path task, nor was it going to be an event. It was always going to be a process. And indeed, it is a process. Differences remain, but the important thing is that dialogue between ourselves and all Western capitals is ongoing, is cordial, and is heading in a positive, productive direction. As Minister of International Trade, my objectives are primarily twofold in a nutshell and again reflect a concentric cycle approach in terms of focus and priorities. They are to promote and facilitate inward foreign direct investment, technology transfer from all reputable sources and across all economic sectors. But in this regard, there's been a big challenge to marry investors with the local private sector. There is no central portal, there is no central organization which would marry the FDI interests into this country with the private sector. And I think the private sector should have all the different projects which are possible, ready for presentation to the private sector. I've seen a few only people who have probably come up with different projects and proposals which could be presented to FDIs. Yes, that's why government has rightfully established the Zimbabwe Investment and Development Agency. The whole issue is to try and get the role of government to play an effective role, but together with the private sector. And of course, we have to ensure that we establish markets. Technology must be brought into this country. And we want to draw tourists to come into this country. And what it means is we have got embassies now, we have got a report which must reflect what have they done for a certain period in each of those areas and what have they achieved. But that must be married with and to the private sector. And firstly, we have even gone further within the region to establish joint permanent commissions. And we've said joint permanent commissions must not be government to government. We sign agreements, but there's no follow-up from the private sector. And we are saying now, all the government to government discussions and negotiations, we must involve the private sector so that they are present in that, whether it is binational commissions. Instead of, we have a binational commission probably with South Africa, and the textile industry comes after that and say, oh, well, South Africa cancelled an agreement, a textile 1964 agreement. Indeed, they have done that. But we must then sit down and look at what are the challenges and how do we go around those kind of issues. And that's why we have then targeted an export. We've come up with an export policy and a strategy. We should be clear, and I know that as CEOs, you are both industrialists, you are also exporters, and you are also in different sectors. Our survival is to produce. And of course, my colleague, I'm sure, is going to say that. But I'm saying, and export quality products. We must be competitive. And let us not have a comfort zone in as far as our exports are concerned. I've seen a number of exporters who have been exporting to one country for the past 20 years. And they've never diversified to go into other areas. But the markets are coming up. And if we don't move, others will move. And remember, it is out of these exports, I'm sure my colleague from Reserve Bank will say so, that exporters are the ones who are going to sustain the auction system, which is serving the industrialists at the moment. So it is critical that we have to maintain that particular aspect. Government is playing its part by way of rolling back bureaucracy under an ease of doing business reforms and under broader fiscal and monetary policy reforms. Already I'm sure that is going to be covered. Your role, as I said, in the private sector is to actively and aggressively market this country abroad. It is not the responsibility of the Minister of Foreign Affairs alone to speak good or to create a rapport with nations. These days they talk about global relations, which includes non-state actors. And what it means is, if in the private sector yourselves, as non-state actors, you now have a role to postulate and propagate to the rest of the international community and to the intended markets, so that you, as you discuss business, speak well about your country. Because there's no other country you have. You only have one, and that's where your business is. And be professional in dealing with the international world. Let us not hear so many issues which come up. Whereas government, we engage our counterparts in various world capitals, seeking wherever necessary to change the negative perception and the narrative which for the past 20 years has isolated this country and has made it difficult for transactions to take place. And we believe that we must portray a country which is in transformation, of a country on the move, and a country which is with myriad trade and investment opportunities. That's the only piece of information which we should deal with. And then you guys go into business, exploit the agreements, and make money for yourselves and, of course, for the nation. The positive impact of reforms effected, I believe, under the TSP are reflected in the slow but steady improvement in Zimbabwe's rating on various global indexes, including the always hard-to-please World Bank ease of doing business rankings, and recently, even the Mo Ibrahim Foundation's 2020 African Government Report, according to which Zimbabwe has been something of a star performer across most African or most areas of scrutiny and comparison. The positive impact of those reforms is also visible in the 4.9% growth in exports. I'm sure even under COVID, over the first 8 months of 2020, when compared with the same period 2019. It is also visible in the range of FDI committed from a truly impressive range of suitors across all economic sectors, most specifically the mining and energy sectors. Whereas these sectors are generally capital intensive and require substantial lead times before real economic benefit is felt, it is in the agricultural sector that we can already see and feel the first stirrings of sustainable economic recovery and growth. The impressive wheat crop we are harvesting, which is being delivered, the return of international airlines, and the beginnings of a tourism revival. The fact that 50% of the forex at the auction floor allocated via the Reserve Bank's auction system is being directed towards the replacement of plant and machinery in the manufacturing sector. The fact that fuel queues have disappeared. The fact that electric power has been constant and consistent. And supermarkets are now carrying a greater percentage of locally manufactured products. These are all signs that the economy is on the move, and that considerable challenges notwithstanding, our prospects for post-COVID economic recovery are very green, indeed, and better than good. So if our critics acknowledge that on the basis of good rainfall and recovery of global commodity prices, encouraging signs of global economic recovery, continuing political and economic reforms, and of course, an end to COVID-19, hopefully with a vaccine, Zimbabwe is set for an economic bounce back in 2021 and relatively strong growth thereafter. Yes, government has set a strategy, well-consulted strategy, the NGS1, and it is there on the ground. Yes, it may not be perfect, it may be ambitious, but it's better to dream than not to dream at all or die. Just 2 days ago, His Excellency the President predicted that Zimbabwe is on the verge of greenness. Even our staunchest detractors acknowledge that. And we believe that our natural resources and the capacity and the capability of our skilled manpower should be able to give us competitiveness over the rest of the region. Now, the key issue now is goods and services must be produced. The services must be an exportable product. And it is critical that government and the private sector must actually work together. Let us establish platforms, probably like this one, but inclusive, which should ensure that we should dialogue. I would have expected by now that the tripartite free trade area and the African Continental Free Trade Area seminars and conferences should have been done by the private sector, so that we invite and then we talk about it, and then we see how we can streamline products which are going to be exportable into the region. Because this is exactly what the rest of the other countries are doing, and we must get this position. Equally so, let me finally end by saying the regional positions, the continental positions, are for Zimbabweans as well to occupy. It is not for us as government to move around and say, well, we are looking for candidates, we are looking for candidates. We don't even know who to talk to. But we must occupy the most influential positions in the international fora, on the continental fora, on the regional fora, so that we can also understand and drive regional, continental, and international agendas. I would like to thank you for this morning.